Everything you know about the Wild West is sanitized. The history books, the museums, even the documentaries, they all skip the parts that make people uncomfortable. Today, you're getting 7 real stories that got quietly erased from the frontier mythology. No filters, no softening, just the raw truth they don't want in the textbooks. Lock in, because these aren't just forgotten, they were deliberately buried. Let's go. Number 1. The town that sold wives like cattle. In the mining camps of California during the 1850s, there was a practice nobody talks about. When a prospector struck it rich and wanted a wife, auctions were held. Real auctions. Women, mostly immigrants, orphans, or those fleeing desperate situations back east, would stand on wooden platforms while men bid. The going rate was anywhere from $50 to several hundred, depending on age and appearance. What makes this even darker? It was legal. Newspapers advertised these events as matrimonial markets, and local sheriffs sometimes supervised to keep order. The women had little choice. It was either this or starvation in a land with no safety net. One diary from a San Francisco boarding house keeper recorded at least 40 such transactions in a single year. Today's historians downplay it as mail-order bride culture, but eyewitness accounts tell a different story. These weren't romantic letters and hopeful meetings. This was human commerce dressed up as courtship. Number 2. Opium dens run by white business leaders. Everyone knows about Chinese opium dens in frontier towns, but here's what they don't teach. The biggest opium operations weren't run by immigrants. They were owned and operated by white businessmen, bankers, merchants, even church deacons. In cities like Denver, Deadwood, and Sacramento, respectable men in suits controlled the supply chain, rented out the buildings, and pocketed the profits, while Chinese workers took the public blame. Police records from the 1880s showed that raids almost exclusively targeted Asian-owned establishments, even though the real money flowed through back rooms of legitimate businesses downtown. One Wyoming newspaper accidentally printed a ledger showing a prominent railroad investor earning more from opium than from freight. The story was retracted within hours, and the journalist left town days later. The narrative that stuck? Dangerous Chinamen corrupting good Americans. Meanwhile, the white men counting drug money got statues in town squares. Number 3. The infant mortality cover-up. Here's a number they never put in Western movies. In frontier towns during the 1870s and 1880s, infant mortality rates sometimes hit 50%. Half of all babies born didn't see their first birthday. The causes? Contaminated water, lack of medical care, harsh winters, infectious disease, and brutal working conditions for pregnant women. But here's the truly disturbing part. Town boosters and land speculators actively hid these statistics. They needed settlers, needed investors, needed the myth of a healthy frontier paradise. So death records got lost, causes got listed as vague terms like fever or weakness, and graveyards were often located far outside town limits where visitors wouldn't see the rows of tiny markers. One Kansas town promotional pamphlet from 1881 bragged about the healthiest climate in America, while that same year, the local doctor's private journal recorded burying 23 children in 8 months. The mythology required sacrifice, and the smallest and most vulnerable paid the price. Number 4. Scalp bounties paid by the government. Everyone knows about scalping during the Indian Wars, but here's what they sanitize. Multiple state and territorial governments issued official bounties for Native American scalps. California, Oregon, and Arizona all had programs where you could turn in a scalp for cash payment. Men, women, children, it didn't matter. In some counties, the price list was posted at the courthouse like hunting regulations. California's 1851 Act offered $5 per head, but some counties paid up to $25. Groups of hunters formed specifically to collect bounties, and there are documented cases of them raiding peaceful villages, killing everyone, and bringing bags full of scalps to town halls for payment. The treasurer would count them out, sign a receipt, and hand over gold coins from public funds, taxpayer money. One Arizona newspaper from 1866 ran a headline celebrating a successful hunt that netted 42 scalps in a single weekend. Today, when you read about Indian conflicts, this is the kind of thing they mean: state-sponsored murder for profit, with receipts. Number 5. The forced sterilization experiments. In the 1890s and early 1900s, as the West transitioned from frontier to statehood, doctors in territorial prisons and asylums began experimenting with forced sterilization. The targets? Native American women, prostitutes, women deemed feeble-minded, and female prisoners. The justification was wrapped in pseudoscience about improving the race and preventing degeneracy. Records from Wyoming Territorial Prison show at least 17 women underwent the procedure without consent between 1892 and 1901. One doctor's notes coldly described it as preventative maintenance for the social order. These weren't rogue operations. They were sanctioned by prison boards and territorial legislatures. California later expanded the practice statewide, sterilizing thousands, but it started in those rough western outposts where nobody was watching and where certain lives were considered disposable. The program continued well into the 20th century, but its roots are buried deep in Old West soil. Number 6. The Sundown Town Network. While everyone focuses on slavery in the South, the West had its own system of racial control: sundown towns. These were communities, dozens of them scattered across frontier states, where non-white people were forbidden after dark. Signs at town limits spelled it out plain: no Negroes after sunset, or Chinese must be gone by evening. If you were caught, best case you got run out of town, worst case you disappeared. In some places, the rule extended to Native Americans, Mexicans, anyone not considered white enough. What's chilling is how organized it was. Town councils passed ordinances, local militias enforced them, and newspapers printed warnings. One Oregon town kept a bell that rang at sunset as a reminder. Another in Wyoming had a committee that patrolled the streets after dark. These policies existed well into the 1950s in some places, but they're almost never mentioned in Western history. The frontier mythology requires freedom and opportunity for all. Sundown towns don't fit that script. Number 7. The contraband baby trade. This is the darkest one, and it's barely documented because everyone involved worked to erase the evidence. In the late 1800s, a black market existed for babies, specifically Native American and mixed-race infants taken from their mothers and sold to white families. Sometimes the mothers were imprisoned women, sometimes they were from reservations, sometimes they were prostitutes whose children were seized by local authorities. Court records from Montana and the Dakotas contain veiled references to orphan placements and adoptions arranged by concerned citizens, but testimonies from tribal elders decades later told a different story. Babies taken by force, papers forged, names changed, entire identities erased. One 1889 letter discovered in a Denver archive casually discusses acquiring an infant for a childless couple and mentions a price of $300, more than most cowboys made in 6 months. The practice fed into what would later become the broader system of Indian boarding schools and forced assimilation, but this specific trade, this market in stolen children, remains one of the most suppressed chapters of Western history. No monuments, no museum exhibits, just fragments in forgotten filing cabinets. So, there you have it. 7 stories they'll never teach in school, never show in a movie, never carve into a monument. The real West wasn't just about shootouts and cattle drives. It was about who held power, who got erased, and who profited from the erasure. If this opened your eyes, drop a comment telling me which story hit hardest. Hit like, subscribe, smash that notification bell, because next week we're going even deeper into the history they tried to bury. Reality doesn't need special effects. It just needs someone willing to dig up the receipts.